week out from Election Day in Ontario. There was a time when we would have called it voting day, but now you can vote. Got lots of opportunity to advance polls, etc. To do all that voting early and often. So we make the turn into the final full week of the campaign, and we have assembled John Wright from Maru Public Opinion and Sabrina Nanji from Queen's Park Observer. It is the Writ Race. It's the daily version of On the Ledge, the Ontario Politics podcast for Story Studio Network. I'm just a programming note. I think after the 3rd of June, I was going to say January, 3rd of June, next Friday, we might just take a pause on the daily. It's just been a little intense. Sabrina, you must be feeling it, just because I know even before the campaign officially started on the 4th of May, this was running at full speed.
Yeah, it's definitely felt like we've been in campaign mode for months before the official kickoff at the beginning of May. But I have to say, it's kind of been a bit of a sleepwalk now. Like, there's not that much time left. And, despite what the political war rooms, especially in the Liberals and NDP, are saying, that they're going to be able to turn this around to move the needle, which, we're not really seeing much happening in the polls. They believe they can do it. So I guess I'm waiting to see, what exciting stuff is going to be coming out in the next week. But yeah, I'm on my second pot of coffee. I think it's not even 9 a.m. I think I'm going to need an IV of caffeine leading up to June 2nd, but we're hanging in there, having fun.
Well, John, you got to wonder. Even I know you've followed campaigns closely over the years, and I rode the buses when there were buses in the federal campaigns. You were jumping on a plane, and I always remarked at the extraordinary capacity of the leaders just to keep up the wild pace. I mean, it was bad enough, and I say bad enough in air quotations because it wasn't like, we were dying or anything or threatened our health or anything, but we on the sort of the campaign as journalists, the press gallery, trying to keep up with the leaders, I always remarked at their endurance and their stamina.
Well, yeah, especially during the last days of a hard-fought campaign, which we're not seeing at the moment. But, Dave, they go to ridings in particular areas in the last week, and they just knock on every door or go to every riding that they can. Sometimes I've seen, as you and Sabrina have, we've seen campaigns that run, basically from Toronto to Ottawa and stop all along the way, or they go from the 905 all the way to Hamilton, and then they go down and, across to London. And it's incredible. It does speak, though, to the people who manage those campaigns. They're wagon masters, the bus driver. I remember Brian Mulroney and the Conservatives in Ontario used to use the same bus driver, Freddie.
Mm-hmm.
And you would know him, and the press people. So it's the last days of the campaign are very hectic, and I'll be interested to see how it plays out because, what you've normally done is watch where the buses go, and those are the ridings that are most in need of that kind of support. So I'll be interested not so much in where the Conservatives go, but where the other two go. And as Sabrina's right, if you look back a week ago, there has been no change in the polls. Mm-hmm. None, not a stitch. So, it really has been between the NDP and the Liberals. What I'm surprised about is that we have not heard anything from the Liberal camp who are in the lead saying, don't vote for her, vote for me. Because if you want to have an impact on having us as a minority, go ahead and help us do that. We haven't heard any of that.
Well, we kind of did yesterday when they leaked that internal polling to Rob Benzie. It was essentially saying, look, if we really work hard, we'll hold the Tories to a minority. So on the one hand, they were sort of, throwing the towel in, so to speak, not quite as loudly as Kathleen Wynne might have, in that part of the campaign. But at the same time, the message was really, we got to beat the NDP. Let's really energize our ground game because it's fairly close margins, and many of those those ridings.
Well, and I don't want to disparage Dan Arnold, who put it out. I mean, he worked in the Prime Minister's office in research, and he's over at Polaire. He's a good guy. But I have seen campaigns over the last 30 years where you're in a bit of a dire situation. I remember Marty Goldfarb doing exactly this, coming out and saying, would you like to see numbers I've got? And what you're really trying to do is bait the media to think you've got a chance at something, but more importantly, give it out so that your workers in the field who may be getting turned away at the door or not getting any response at the door say, hey, we're still in this. I mean, you've got to keep the troops moving ahead. So there's nothing in my data that suggests, a hard-fought liberal battle at the moment. But who knows? Maybe that's what they are finding. But again, it was leaked by the party, who is in second place, running for their lives to get more seats. I'd be hard-pressed not to find people saying it was a tactic.
Oh, for sure. It
else.
Entirely was. I mean, similar to the conservative leak, I would think a week earlier, Sabrina. I mean, that was intended to light a fire under, the workers on the ground, and maybe even crush some of the morale of the opposition in some respects.
Yeah, I mean, there's the campaigns are definitely getting like a lot sharper in their attacks. Like everyone was kind of playing nice at the outset of this. Now we're closing in on June 2nd. There's attacks left and right coming. I think, it's of course it's a tactic when you're, on the party side of things, to leak things to certain media. I mean, every party does it. I thought, with the Star and getting that internal memo from the Grits about, they're best suited to hold Ford and the Conservatives to a minority was interesting, because the same day the Star's own poll aggregator was saying that the NDP are gaining
surging.
at the Liberals'
I know.
expense. Yeah.
My head spun too. It was crazy.
It's all this back and forth, but actually it just goes to show you like what the polls are actually saying, which, it's either the NDP up by a few points, the Liberals, it depends on, which parts of the province you're looking at. But this back and forth between the Liberals and the NDP, it just works out in Doug Ford and the Conservatives' favor. It favors the status quo parties. Poor Mike Schreiner, that we were all saying, he had the best performance, the most to gain in the debate not too long ago. It doesn't seem like he's been able to move the needle very much either. And, not to mention Schreiner and NDP leader Andrea Horwath have been benched. They're just back on the campaign trail, after a week when they contracted COVID. They're done their isolation period now. That's definitely going to be a hit to them, I think, especially someone like Horwath, who she kind of does better one-on-one, face-to-face with people, the nitty-gritty handshaking that we see. So, all of this is being calculated too. I thought it was interesting. The Star also got what I believe is an exclusive. I don't think anyone else has had a one-on-one like that with Doug Ford. Martin Redcone kind of tagged along with Ford, who was out door knocking over in Vaughan Woodbridge, Stephen Del Duca's territory. And so, they pick and choose their media, and there's a lot of reasons and calculations behind that. I mean, if any parties want to leak me some brown envelopes, I'm open for it, for sure.
Well, two things, and I want to pick up on that idea that the premier, or Doug Ford, was in Del Duca's riding, and he is clearly campaigning for Michael Tobolo there, the incumbent, who won by a fairly good wallop up the side of the head to Del Duca in the last campaign. It wasn't a squeaker by any stretch of the imagination. So there's that part of it where they are targeting Del Duca. They're not necessarily targeting Horwath in the same way in terms of campaigning. But the thing I heard, another thing that kind of struck me this morning, I was listening to Nick Nanos talking about his latest polling numbers. And for those who were talking, were saying, well, the debate really didn't make much difference. You guys might be more attuned to this. But it sounds to me like since the debate, Horwath's own approval numbers have taken a dump. As in, who would you want to be the premier? It sounds to me like she's just on the fast fade. Now, is that how you're reading that, Sabrina?
Yeah, I think it was, she's still in second place, the numbers I've seen, for who would make best premier. But I think maybe Ford gained a little bit. She was down a little bit. I think some of those points, might be within the margin of error. But I think, yeah, we all had kind of high expectations for Horvath. It's her fourth time on the debate stage like that. She had a bit of a higher bar, to meet. And I don't think she quite did that, and then again with, her being benched because of COVID and not being out there on the campaign trail, campaigning virtually. Not the best look, I guess, is kind of what the public is saying.
Yeah, John, I think if I remember off the top of my head, she was down below 20% in Nick's numbers. Now I realize it's, we've got one here and one there, but Nick's in the field, I think, daily. So, and he's watching that trend. And even if we do look at it, there just seems to be she's off the radar for so many people.
Yeah, and it is a bit surprising. I do a quarterly tracking of all of the premiers across the country. And hence I'm able to see where Doug Ford is from election day through to every quarter and what's going on. But I also, during that time, I'm tracking the opposition leaders. It's not released, but I have it in part of my range. And she was up around 40%.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't got the latest one in. And if, Nick's very reliable, if she's in the 20% range, then that's a significant drop. I think it speaks. So I think I said to you yesterday, Dave, that when I went and voted in an advance poll because I'm heading out of town. It'll be the first election that I actually miss election day in my entire life, and I can't help it. But so I went out to vote in the advance poll, and I went in Toronto. It was in St. Paul's riding. It was at the Church of the Transfiguration. And there was nobody there. There was nobody. I mean, I was greeted by more people who were scrutineers and who were officials than there were voters. I think there were three of us there, and this is in the middle of the afternoon. The issue is there's no enthusiasm for this campaign. And the difficulty is for the opposition, and particularly the NDP, to get the vote out. Because the Tories are far more efficient, meaning that you've got older people, taxpayers who go out, and vote as opposed to the others. So with Andrea Horwath down in the popularity ratings or the approval ratings for her versus the others, it's bad news. And especially when you look at St. Paul's riding where I am, where you've got a bit of a fluke where Jill Andrews from the NDP has got the riding that Eric Hoskins had, and now you have another doctor. We only seem to run doctors in this riding. Dr. Stahl is running. You need to have that enthusiasm, and it's just not there.
So I saw this tweet this morning, and I wonder whether or not there's a lesson to be learned here, or maybe I'm overthinking it. But it responds to the mass shooting, the mass murder in Texas. All these little kids were gunned down in their school by an 18-year-old shooter. And Del Duca comes out and expresses condolences, etc. But the tagline is, we need gun control. The need for gun control has never been clearer. And I think we even started before the campaign, Sabrina, saying, yeah, okay, he was banging the drum on gun control before the campaign officially started, and it's out of his jurisdiction. It seems to me like just another case of the Liberals grasping at some kind of emotional straw that they hope is going to, light a fire for them. I don't get it.
Yeah, I think this one has the risk of backfiring. I mean, obviously, this didn't really necessarily happen in our in our backyard. And you're right, about the Liberals' proposed handgun ban. I mean, there's really not much that's in provincial jurisdiction. Del Duca has said that he's going to work with the feds on that one, municipalities as well. Okay. He also announced this pledge over in Scarborough, which has been devastated by gun violence over the last couple of years and is a very politically contentious spot. I think the Conservatives picked up there for the first time in almost 20 years in 2018. Sure, they've lost an incumbent in Christina Midas, but they're feeling confident over there. Mitzi Hunter over in Scarborough Guildwood, a Liberal, she was the closest race in 2018. Less than 100 votes she took that riding. So obviously there's politics at play here, as there always is. But I think this runs the risk of getting called like ambulance chasers. I think there was that back and forth even with the storm, the Saturday's big storm that hit, with Del Duca claiming to be suspending his campaign. Of course, Conservatives took issue with that. He was up there, taking photos, in the Ottawa area, super hard hit by the storm. And he was taking photos. He held a press conference. A lot of Conservatives were saying, well, how have you suspended the campaign? You're still there doing all this stuff, and getting headlines out of it. But of course he's trying to look, like the premier. And then we did see Doug Ford kind of follow and take this impromptu trip to go survey the damage over in Uxbridge, which he brought his candidate there, Peter Bethlen-Falvey, with him. But it's a little bit different for Ford because he actually is the premier, and they don't want to be talking about, what is the province doing? What is the province not doing? And they obviously don't want it to be taking away from their campaign tour. So that one was a little bit touchy too. But at the end of the day, I do think that this could run the risk of backfiring. As to whether the public cares about it so much as the opposing war rooms, I'm not sure. But of course, they're going to tie everything they can back to their pledge and this election and what's actually happening here in Ontario.
So with a week to go and before you head off on your vast journey just to try to get through Pearson International security, John, handicap this for me in terms of was there ever a point or an opportunity for either of the opposition parties, all due respect to Mike and the Greens, but the NDP and the Liberals, to really light a fire in this campaign? And if there was, and it didn't happen, was it a failure of their campaign organizers, their actual war rooms?
I think it's more the latter. I think right from the outset, with Keith Leslie on and Sabrina and you and I, we recognized something, and that was that, first of all three parties or four parties with Mike Schreiner are all talking about the same thing. And so if everybody's talking about the same thing, what's the issue, right? Like in politics, you have to drive wedges. You have to find a theme. You have to, in this case, take the great big pillowy, fluffy, huge budget that's been talked about for 6 months in advance and then go to the people with it. You got to cut through it. So buck a ride, slice through all of that, and then went on a hiatus while 4 days of talking about education suddenly appeared. I don't know why it was 4 days, and I don't know why it was, let's do grade 13 and a bunch of other stuff. It didn't have a cut through on that. It didn't make any sense to kind of get into that area. I think that's the real issue. Everybody, when they talk about affordability, is singing the same verse. Nobody's doing anything about it, right? Doug Ford's got the best line, and it's kind of like, get me there and I'll drop the gas tax by 5 cents. So you've got to find ways to cut through it. I also note at the end of the campaign, we're now starting to get the eruptions, targeted from the Conservatives over to the other parties as well, for candidates that they've got on Facebook or other things. I mean, this is just, again, cutting through, and it eats up time. So, Dave, I think you have to plot this stuff out months in advance. You have to figure a war room that, like Warren Kinsella runs, that or he did, that cuts through stuff during a campaign and gives it a sense of momentum. There has been none by either, and that's why I think from the outset, in managing expectations, the NDP and its leader were just trying to hang on to opposition, and they'll fail at that. Mr. Del Duca and the Liberals were trying to manage so that they can get official opposition back and get some funding for their party, and get moving again. But their real goal will be 2026. For the Conservatives, it was to expand the majority that they have and to be able to go with a full mandate back to Queen's Park, which they will get. And for Mike Schreiner, I don't know, but I would argue that he has presented himself as a very credible candidate for leader of the NDP. He has talked not just about green stuff, but much like the last federal NDP leader, has veered into a whole bunch of other things. I mean, whether it be income or whether it be housing or whether, be anything else on the campaign, he's into a mix of issues and he's well respected. And I don't say it with any fun to it. He would make a great leader of the NDP, in my view. So that's kind of where we are at the end of the day.
Well, and I guess, Sabrina, the sad part about all of this, and to John's point, it's not like they didn't know this was coming. And even during the course of the pandemic, the leader of the opposition, and you and I, and we've all talked about this over the last year or so or more, was almost invisible. And I understand that a lot of the oxygen was taken up by the daily news conferences, by, the premier, et cetera. But there was never an effort on the part of particularly the NDP to stand up and say, here's the vision moving forward. Here's, kind of to John's point. Here's where this is the focus. This has sharpened the issue for us months before the campaign started. They had that opportunity and they failed. How much of that happened because there were already rumblings of what you're calling the 901 Club?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely at play here, for sure. But, Andrea Horwath had said it herself, it's her job as official opposition to play the accountability police, and I think a lot of people are kind of upset about how long that happened. Of course, there's a lot of factors into why all opposition parties were having trouble getting their message out during the pandemic. But even now, we're in a campaign and the onus is kind of on these parties to present themselves as government in waiting. And we haven't really seen that much, or at least that message be sticking with the public, especially from the NDP. Andrea Horwath seems to be playing catch up. I mean, of course, the party has said that promise to lift tolls for truckers on the 407 came, it was unbudgeted, not part of their platform, either of their platforms, the uncosted version and then the costed version we got later. And the party line seemed to be, well, we wanted to sprinkle some surprises throughout the campaign just to, push momentum. We can't tell you what else is coming because that would ruin the surprise. I haven't seen any surprises there, but it kind of played like a last ditch attempt. I know a lot of dippers were unhappy with that because it would favor the trucking companies and in particular, not big fans. And I think, more generally, I don't know why the opposition parties aren't talking more about the pandemic, Ford's handling of it. I know everyone wants to forget it and move on from it as best we can now, especially, heading into summer. But the Ford conservatives do not like talking about their record on healthcare, for all the praise they give nurses. They don't like speaking about their own policies in long-term care. And yet the opposition parties are talking about stuff that, people tend to trust the conservatives on more. They're talking about highways. They're talking about gas tax prices. That's kind of working out in the conservatives' favor too. And so that war room is feeling very good and confident that, essentially their opposition parties are doing the work for them. I know that the conservatives have this attack ad against Stephen Del Duca that they have waiting in the wings. I heard it was imminent, but I think they probably don't feel the need to put it out there because these guys are, doing the job for them. It's like a self-own. That ad is going to be highlighting, Stephen Del Duca's drama with his pool, the rules he was supposed to follow, the permits he was supposed to get that he didn't get for his backyard swimming pool that he now has. But that ad hasn't come, and I feel like the conservatives don't really feel the need to play those big guns just yet.
Why spend the money? I mean, right? I mean, there's probably no need. When you look at this campaign, I think the one thing that it will be remembered for is that the opposition goal was to lose, and that was considered success. That's kind of where we walk through in this final week. John, enjoy your time off. We'll call you with the results. It'll be early where you are, but I know you'll be paying attention. Do enjoy your. It sounds like a great trip with the boys.
Thank you. It should be. It's going to be the first big trip, and so we've planned to. We're heading to the battlefields of France, and then to D-Day for the ceremony. So my grandfather, their great-grandfather, fought across that terrain, and we're taking every step along the way. So thanks. I'm looking forward to getting back to the other battles.
Very good. John Wright of Maru Public Opinion. Sabrina Nanji is the editor and founder of the Queen's Park Observer. I'm Dave Trafford. It's the Writ Race, the daily edition of On the Ledge, the Ontario Politics Podcast.